The morning sun cast long shadows across my office desk in downtown Boston, where various investment portfolios and client documents lay scattered. I'm Michael, a 32-year-old investment advisor, though my current success wouldn't hint at my troubled past. My younger brother James has harbored a deep-seated resentment towards me that goes beyond simple sibling rivalry. If you think it stemmed from jealousy of my success, you'd be wrong. He was the favored child, not me. Our mother Linda always showered him with preferential treatment, creating a dynamic that would ultimately tear our family apart. To give you some context, Linda consistently indulged James' every whim. He was the golden child of our family, receiving endless attention and care while I was left to fend for myself. She'd cook his favorite meals, handle all his daily needs, and even pressure me to help him with his schoolwork. "He's your brother, Michael. Family helps family," she'd say, though this philosophy never seemed to apply when I needed support. I learned to be self-sufficient, perhaps to a fault. Maybe it was partly my responsibility for always meeting others' needs without expecting anything in return. James never lifted a finger to help me, only approaching when he wanted something. While I was the quiet, studious type who preferred spending time with books and investment analyses, James was loud and aggressive, taking after our father Robert's personality, though not his work ethic. "Dar Richardson says your therapy session is scheduled for Thursday." My assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, pulling me from my memories. "I've been seeing a therapist to work through these family issues, especially since recent events have brought everything to the surface. I've always been direct and honest, never one to sugarcoat things. I believe this straightforwardness may have contributed to Linda's negative perception of me. Her favoritism made James the family darling, and while I tried to accept it during our childhood, problems escalated when he began actively bullying me for being different from him. Growing up, the bullying started subtly, but grew increasingly malicious. James would mock my height, my glasses, and my dedication to studying. In our shared bathroom, he'd deliberately hide my contact lenses or move my things around, knowing it would disrupt my carefully planned morning routine. He'd sneak into my room when I was at the library, read through my private journals, and then complain to Linda about my written thoughts regarding the family's dynamics. "Mom, why does Michael write such horrible things about us?" he'd say with fake concern, knowing it would turn her against me even more. When I confronted our parents about his invasion of my privacy, they'd dismiss it with uncomfortable laughter. "Boys will be boys," Linda would say, while Robert remained buried in his construction company paperwork. The torment evolved into more dangerous territory. James began tampering with my food when Linda wasn't looking, once placing small stones in my cereal that could have broken my teeth. When I showed Linda the evidence, she waved it off with her usual response: "This is just how brothers bond, Michael. You're being too sensitive." During our high school years, the psychological warfare intensified. James would zero in on my insecurities with surgical precision, particularly during our shared rides to school. He knew about the bullying I faced from certain classmates, but instead of showing brotherly support, he allied with them. "Hey guys, the ugly losers here," he'd announce, encouraging them to join in the torment. "The hairy monkey's probably been up all night studying again." The worst came during a particularly heated argument over something trivial. I think it was about him borrowing my laptop without permission. James turned to me, his face twisted with contempt, and said words that still echo in my mind. "Why don't you just kill yourself? Nobody would miss you anyway." At the time, I was struggling with depression and seeing a counselor secretly. Those words cut deeper than any physical wound could have. Robert spent most of his time at his construction sites, and Linda, well, she seemed to have an endless supply of excuses for James' behavior. "If you wouldn't antagonize him, Michael," she'd say, somehow turning his actions into my fault. I spent those years feeling like an outsider in my own home, finding solace in my studies, and my growing interest in financial markets. The turning point. Things reached a breaking point during my senior year of high school. One afternoon, while I was reviewing college applications in our family room, James took his torment to a frightening new level. He approached me from behind with a lighter, attempting to set my hair on fire while I was focused on my paperwork. The smell of burning hair filled the room before I could react. Unbelievably, Linda rushed in and tried to defend him. He was just playing around, Michael. You're always so serious. This incident finally opened Robert's eyes to the severity of the situation. For the first time, I saw genuine anger flash across my father's face as he confronted James. This isn't just teenage pranks anymore, he thundered, threatening to involve the police. You could have seriously injured your brother. What were you thinking? Seeing James's stunned expression, he'd never faced real consequences before, was a moment I'll never forget. Robert made it crystal clear. Enough is enough. This stops now. You will start respecting your older brother, or there will be serious consequences. Later that evening, Robert came to my room. Something he rarely did, given how consumed he usually was with his construction business. Sitting on the edge of my bed, he looked older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. Listen, son, he began, his voice heavy with regret. I always thought you and James would work things out, just like brothers do. I was wrong to wait this long to step in. The validation in his words nearly broke me. Years of pent-up emotions threatened to spill over as I finally opened up about everything. The daily torments, the school bullying, the constant feeling of being an outsider in our own family. Robert listened intently, his expression growing grimmer with each revelation. First thing tomorrow, I'm speaking to your principal, he declared. And after that, we're getting you started at Stevens and Gym. It's time you learn to stand up for yourself. I must have looked skeptical, a bookish investment enthusiast learning martial arts. But Robert was insistent. Being smart is great, son, but in this world, you need to be strong too. I should have taught you this years ago. MMA training. True to his word, Robert enrolled me in MMA classes. Between my college prep studies and daily workouts, I developed a rigorous schedule that left little time for James's harassment. The physical transformation was gradual but significant. I gained muscle, confidence, and most importantly, a sense of personal power I'd never had before. The confrontation. The inevitable confrontation came one Saturday afternoon. James had stolen my savings from my room, money I'd earned from helping at Dad's construction sites and carefully saved for months. I caught him just as he was about to cycle away with his friends, counting my money with a smirk on his face. Give it back, James, I demanded, my voice steady with newfound confidence. My brother's response was predictably dismissive. What are you going to do about it? Run crying to Daddy, like always? He taunted, drawing snickers from his friends. Something inside me snapped. All those years of martial arts training kicked in instinctively. Before James could react, I delivered a precise punch that caught him squarely in the face. He fell backward, more shocked than hurt, his eyes wide with disbelief. I calmly retrieved my money from his pocket before shoving him away. The scene that followed was almost comical. James, the perpetual bully, burst into tears like a child. Linda came rushing out at the sound of his wailing, her face contorted with anger when she realized what had happened. Michael, how could you hit your younger brother? I raised you to be better than this. No, Mom, I corrected her, my voice firm. You didn't raise me at all. You were too busy coddling James. Robert called us both into his study that evening. His face was stern as he asked for explanations. I explained about the stolen money. Money I'd earned through honest work. James tried to justify his actions with his usual excuses. I needed it for a date, he whined. Michael should help me out. That's what brothers do. Robert's response surprised us both. James, he said gravely, you're lucky your brother only punched you. Anyone else would have called the police for theft. You have no right to take what isn't yours, regardless of your reasons. The shock on James' face was priceless. He'd clearly expected our mother's usual protection. When he realized no help was coming, he exploded in rage. I hate you, he screamed at me. I hate all of you. He stormed off to his room, slamming the door so hard the pictures rattled on the walls. The aftermath. After that incident, a noticeable shift occurred in our family dynamics. James began keeping his distance, finally understanding that his days of unchecked bullying were over. Even more significantly, he realized that Robert had stopped enabling his behavior. While we were technically equals now, James seemed to harbor even more resentment. His physical attacks may have stopped, but his verbal jabs continued whenever our parents weren't around. His behavior grew increasingly bitter with each passing year. If I asked him a simple question about dinner plans or family events, he'd either ignore me completely or mutter insults under his breath. Nerd, loser, or worse. When he needed to communicate something, he'd relay messages through Linda rather than speak to me directly. Why can't he just talk to me himself? I once asked Linda during a particularly frustrating week. Try to be more understanding, Michael, she replied, her default response to any criticism of James. He's still processing things in his own way. Living under the same roof became increasingly unbearable. I made several attempts to mend our relationship, repeatedly asking Linda to mediate a conversation between us. Each time, she refused, claiming she didn't want to get involved. The irony of her sudden desire for neutrality wasn't lost on me. When I asked her directly why she thought James treated me with such contempt, she would skillfully deflect the question. It was clear that acknowledging the depth of our family's dysfunction was too uncomfortable for her to face. University life. Salvation came in the form of a full scholarship to a prestigious university's business program. My high grades and dedication to studying had finally paid off. Robert threw a celebration party, and even Linda seemed genuinely proud. James, however, remained in his room during the entire celebration, emerging only to grab food before disappearing again. The day I left for university felt like being released from prison. I packed my car with everything I owned, ready to start a new chapter in my life. As I pulled out of our driveway, I caught a glimpse of James watching from his window, his expression unreadable. Part of me hoped that distance might heal our relationship, but another part knew that some wounds run too deep for simple solutions. College years. Those first months at university were transformative. For the first time in my life, I could breathe freely without constantly looking over my shoulder. I threw myself into my business classes, joined investment clubs, and started building meaningful friendships. The constant weight of James' hostility lifted, allowing my confidence to flourish naturally. During my second year, while attending a networking event that doubled as a casual mixer, I met Sarah. She worked as an accountant at a local firm and was pursuing her CPA certification. We connected instantly over our shared interest in finance and our ambitious career goals. While discussing investment strategies over coffee, I found myself drawn to her sharp intellect and practical approach to life. Sarah came from a traditional family with strong religious values, particularly regarding marriage and children. So when we discovered she was pregnant during our final year of college, we decided to marry shortly after graduation. It felt like the right decision. We were in love, building our careers, and ready to start our life together. The wedding. Our wedding was an intimate affair, focusing more on substance than show. Robert and Linda attended, expressing their happiness for us, though James maintained his characteristic aloofness throughout the ceremony. I had hoped that such a significant life event might bridge the gap between us, but he remained distant, barely acknowledging my attempt to include him in the celebrations. At that point in my life, I truly believed Sarah was my perfect match. My vision of marriage was traditional: one partner, one life, complete devotion to each other. Despite occasional attention from other women, as my career in investment advising took off, I never wavered in my commitment to Sarah. She was everything I wanted in a partner, and I was determined to be the best husband and father I could be. However, life had other plans. Over the years, I discovered Sarah had been unfaithful twice. The first incident involved a prolonged affair with a married colleague that spanned several years, while the second was a brief encounter with an ex-boyfriend during a family visit. Looking back, perhaps I was naive to think we could move past such betrayals, but my determination to maintain a stable home for our child drove me to try. Marriage troubles. Each time Sarah's infidelity came to light, we separated temporarily. Both times, I chose forgiveness, partly because I didn't want our child growing up in a broken home, and partly because I believed people deserved second chances. The affair with her coworker happened when we were both still finding our footing in our careers. I rationalized it as a youthful indiscretion, a mistake made during a vulnerable time. For a while, things seemed to improve. Though I could never fully trust her again, I worked hard to move forward. I was building a successful career as an investment advisor. Our home life appeared stable, and I focused on being the best father I could be. Despite my lingering doubts, I knew that if I had chosen to forgive, I needed to commit to that decision fully. The revelation. It had been 4 years since Sarah's last betrayal, and I felt confident in my decision to give our marriage another chance. We were making plans for our future, discussing possibly having another child. Then, 3 months ago, my world imploded. Sarah approached me one evening after dinner, her face uncharacteristically serious. "We need to talk," she began, her voice steady but distant. "There's something you should know about our son." The words that followed hit me like a physical blow. Sarah revealed she had been involved in a long-term affair and suggested that our child might not be mine. I sat there, struggling to process the magnitude of this betrayal, my mind refusing to accept what I was hearing. "How long?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. In the days that followed, I pressed Sarah for answers, demanding to know why she had kept such a monumental secret. Her responses were cold, almost clinical, as if she were discussing someone else's life rather than our marriage. "Who is the father?" I finally asked, though something in my gut already knew the answer. Sarah's response confirmed my worst fears. "It's James," she said quietly. The painful truth. My world spun as I struggled to comprehend Sarah's words. When I asked her to explain, she revealed how she and James had grown close during her first visit to my family home, from Thanksgiving through New Year's. James, who had never shown me anything but contempt, had been surprisingly warm and welcoming to Sarah. "He was so different from how you described him," Sarah explained, her voice taking on a distant, almost dreamy quality. "He was charming, attentive, everything you said he wasn't." The revelation that followed made my stomach turn. Sarah had spent considerable time with Linda, eager to be accepted into the family. During these visits, she noticed the tension between James and me, eventually asking me about it. I had opened up about our strained relationship, explaining that the damage might be irreparable. Sarah, in what she claimed was an attempt to help, started including James in our activities. Movie nights became group events, with James always choosing the film. During this time, James and I exchanged occasional words. What I had foolishly interpreted as progress was actually just a cover for their growing intimacy. James was going through a breakup, Sarah continued, her voice softening. He was vulnerable, and we connected. It started with innocent flirting when you weren't around, but things escalated. The thought of my brother and wife together made bile rise in my throat. Sarah explained that she felt guilty afterward and abruptly left before New Year's, despite my pleas for her to stay. When we reunited at college after the holidays, she had seemed her usual cheerful self, giving me no reason to suspect anything was wrong. 2 weeks later, we discovered she was pregnant. Sarah admitted she wasn't sure who the father was, but she had chosen to stay with me, knowing I was the more stable choice. This, she revealed, was the real reason for our hasty marriage. "Have you been seeing him recently?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Sarah nodded slowly. "We never really stopped," she confessed. "The chemistry between us is undeniable. Those business trips, the overtime work, we've been meeting at hotels. The confrontation. Why marry me if you wanted James?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tornado of emotions inside me. Sarah's response was painfully honest. "I didn't want to be the one to end things. You're such a good father to our son, and your career was taking off. It seemed practical to stay." "Practical," I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. "You mean financially secure." I stood up from our kitchen table, where we'd had countless family dinners, made countless plans for a future that was now evaporating. "I'm leaving," I announced, already heading for our bedroom. "What? Just like that?" Sarah's composure finally cracked. She followed me as I began packing a suitcase. "I thought you'd yell, fight, something." "What's there to fight about?" I replied, methodically folding my clothes. "You've been lying to me for years." Sarah's tactics shifted rapidly. Tears began flowing as she grabbed my arm. "If you really love me, you'll fight for us. Everyone makes mistakes." When I continued packing, she changed strategies again. "Think about our son. Children shouldn't be raised in broken homes." I paused, turning to face her. "Our son? You mean the child who might be my brother's? That's what you're using to manipulate me now." Her tears flowed harder. "You're being cruel," she accused. "No, Sarah. Cruel is letting me raise a child for years without knowing he might be my nephew." I zipped up my suitcase. "Cruel is watching me love him, care for him, while knowing the truth." As I walked out, Sarah stood crying on our doorstep, looking small and lost, a stark contrast to the confident woman who had calmly confessed to years of deception just hours before. I felt nothing but a hollow emptiness as I drove to the nearest hotel. The revelation to parents. The next morning, I drove straight to my parents' house, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I found them having their usual morning coffee in the kitchen. Robert reading his construction reports, Linda doing her crossword puzzle. Their peaceful routine was about to be shattered. "I need to tell you something about Sarah and James," I began, my voice steady, despite the tremor in my hands. I laid out everything: the affair, the possibility that my son might actually be James' child, the years of deception. The shock on their faces was palpable. True to form, Linda immediately tried to defend James. "There must be some mistake," she stammered. "My James would never." "Let's prove it then," I interrupted, pulling out my phone. "I'll call him right now. But don't say anything. Let him think it's just me on the line." Robert nodded grimly, placing a restraining hand on Linda's arm. When James answered, I went straight to the point. "I know about you and Sarah." His initial denials were vigorous, but when I mentioned Sarah's confession, his tone changed completely. "Well, what did you expect?" he sneered. "I've always been the better-looking brother. If women prefer me, that's not my fault." "You're saying you're not at fault for sleeping with your brother's wife?" I pressed, watching Linda's face grow pale. "Please," James scoffed, his arrogance evident. "No one's going to believe you anyway. I'm the golden child, remember? Always have been." "Thanks for confirming everything," I said calmly. By the way, Mom and Dad just heard every word. The silence that followed was deafening. James spluttered, trying to backtrack, but the damage was done. I ended the call and looked at my parents. Robert's face was dark with anger, while Linda sat frozen, her crossword forgotten. The confrontation with parents. Linda's shock quickly turned to desperate defense. James, call back right now, she pleaded into her phone. There must be an explanation. But when James called back, his attempts to explain only made things worse. His voice wavered between arrogance and panic as he tried to shift blame onto Sarah, calling her characterless and easy. With each word, he dug himself deeper, revealing the true nature of his character. I sat there, watching my mother's world crumble as her golden child's true nature was exposed. Her hands trembled as she held the phone, tears forming in her eyes. For the first time, she was seeing James as he really was, not as she had imagined him to be. Robert stood up, his voice cutting through James's excuses. "That's enough," he said, his tone carrying years of suppressed disappointment. "What you've done isn't just a betrayal of your brother. It's a betrayal of everything this family stands for." The silence in the kitchen was heavy as Robert continued. "I raised both of you to value family loyalty and basic human decency. But you, James, you've shown nothing but contempt for these values. Sleeping with your brother's wife, continuing the affair even after they were married, having a child and hiding the truth, the consequences." Robert's next words came like hammer blows. "From today, you're cut off. The college fund I set up for you? Gone. The allowance that funds your lifestyle? Finished. Let's see how you manage without my money to bail you out." I maintained my composure throughout, though inside I felt a mix of vindication and sadness. This wasn't the triumphant moment I might have imagined. Watching my brother finally face consequences for his actions brought more emptiness than satisfaction. Family aftermath. Linda tried once more to defend James, but Robert silenced her with a look that left no room for argument. After he ended the call, my mother approached me slowly, tears streaming down her face. She wrapped her arms around me in an embrace that felt decades overdue. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have believed in you all these years." The 14-year-old boy inside me, the one who had yearned for his mother's understanding and support, finally felt a weight lift from his shoulders. But this moment of healing came at a devastating cost to our family. Legal proceedings. With Robert's help, I found a top-tier divorce attorney. Sarah and her lawyer tried aggressive tactics, demanding alimony based on our income disparity, but her infidelity significantly weakened her position. The paternity test results arrived during the proceedings, confirming what Sarah had confessed. James was indeed my son's biological father. That revelation hit harder than Sarah's infidelity. The child I had loved, nurtured, and raised as my own was actually my brother's son. The anger I felt was overwhelming, but I channeled it into moving forward with my life. Sarah begged me to maintain a relationship with her son. "He shouldn't be punished for our mistakes," she pleaded. "You're the only father he's ever known." But I couldn't do it. Every time I looked at him, I saw James' features staring back at me, a constant reminder of their betrayal. The decision to step away was painful, but necessary for my own healing. New beginnings. After the divorce was finalized, I moved into a modern apartment in downtown Boston. Living alone for the first time since college felt strange but liberating. My natural independence served me well as I adjusted to this new chapter of my life, focusing on my investment advisory practice and personal growth. The inheritance. 2 weeks ago, I received an unexpected call from Robert. "I'm changing my will," he said without preamble. "I won't leave anything to James. What he's done, I can't forgive it. My father always a man of strong convictions, had remained firm in his decision to cut James out of his life. Despite James' attempts to reconcile, showing up at their doorstep, begging for forgiveness, our parents had maintained their stance. Even Linda, who had always given in to James' dramatics, seemed to have finally reached her limit. "I'm leaving everything to you," Robert continued. "The house will stay in your mother's name until she passes. But everything else, my assets, retirement fund, life insurance, it all goes to you. About $2 million in total." I sat in silence, processing this information. Robert had worked hard his entire life, building his construction company from the ground up. The inheritance wasn't just money. It was the fruit of decades of honest work and dedication. The final confrontation. Yesterday, my phone lit up with James' number. Somehow, he'd learned about the will. His voice was desperate as he tried to make amends. "Look, I'm struggling here," he pleaded. "I had to drop out of college because I can't afford it. Sarah's demanding child support, and I can barely make ends meet at my mechanic job. Can't we start fresh? I really need your help." I couldn't help but laugh. A cold, bitter sound that surprised even me. "You should have thought about consequences before sleeping with my wife and hiding my son's paternity for years." "That's not fair," James protested. "Sarah's equally to blame." "You're right," I agreed coolly. "And I divorced her. She's your responsibility now, along with your child." James' voice rose in panic. "Everyone's turned against me. Even our grandparents and extended family won't talk to me anymore." "That's not my problem," I replied, my voice steady. "We're done, James. Don't call me again. You're not my brother anymore." Recent updates. The conversation with James has been replaying in my mind. Despite years of resentment, hearing my brother cry, something I hadn't witnessed since we were children, affected me more than I expected. But I've learned that empathy doesn't require action. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. Update after 5 months. My relationship with my parents has evolved in unexpected ways. Robert and I have developed a closer bond than ever before. We golf every weekend, talking more like friends than father and son. Linda, while still struggling with James' absence, has maintained her distance from him, perhaps finally understanding the damage her favoritism caused. Through my cousin, I've heard that James continues to struggle. He's working as a mechanic full-time now, living with Sarah as they raise their son together. They've had to downsize significantly, adjusting to a life without the financial support they both took for granted. My own life has taken a positive turn. A recent promotion has significantly increased my salary at the investment firm, and I've been channeling my energy into personal growth. While I'm not ready to date yet, I've been attending therapy sessions regularly, working through the complex emotions of the past year. My therapist helps me understand that it's okay to feel conflicted about cutting ties with my nephew, biologically my son. The guilt sometimes creeps in, but I remind myself that boundaries are necessary for healing. Sarah occasionally attempts to reach out through mutual friends, but I maintain my distance. Some chapters need to stay closed for new ones to begin. The future feels uncertain but full of possibility. For the first time in my life, I'm living entirely on my own terms, free from the weight of toxic family dynamics and betrayal. While the pain hasn't completely subsided, it's become more manageable. I'm learning that sometimes the best family isn't the one you're born into, but the one you choose to build for yourself.